Well, welcome everyone to our workshop today on using questioning strategies in the inquiry for an inquiry classroom. We're excited you guys are here. I'm going to introduce our team here in a little bit, but I just want to kind of go through a few things. First, you'll find our social media handles there and also a link at the bottom of the screen to our foundation page where you can find a lot of resources, and we'll be talking more about that as we go through this workshop. So again, welcome. If you're just joining, please continue to introduce yourself in the chat. And we're going to go ahead and get started with our workshop. So I want to introduce now the team here. Again, my name is Holly Denard. I'm going to be the facilitator today for this particular workshop, but we have an awesome team. And I'm just going to kind of quickly introduce them. Jason is going to be running our tech today. So Jason, if you want to unmute, say hello. Woo.
Yes, good morning, good afternoon. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Very excited to have you here.
Thank you. Good morning.
Look forward to learning with all of you.
Awesome. And David, also unmute really quick, introduce yourself.
I was just gonna wait, but I will stop and say hello to everyone.
Good.
Happy to have you all join us today, and looking forward to hearing some of the great work that's going to be shared in the next hour.
Awesome. Jess is here. If you want to wave, Jess, or unmute. All right, and we also have John.
Morning, everybody. Welcome.
And Carmen.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome.
All right, thanks you guys. So this is our team, our small but mighty team that puts on monthly and also weekly presentations. I'm going to start though this morning just introducing some of the norms for today. So the unmuting the mic, we really want to hear from you. But while the workshop is in session, if you could please just mute your microphone so we can avoid any background noise. Also, we'd love to see your faces, and I'd love to, we want this to be very interactive. So if you can turn on your cameras so that we can recognize you and interact a little bit better. And then last, we encourage using the chat box all throughout this for any questions, because we want to keep this a really collaborative workshop, really engaging workshop. So we're relying on you all to participate either using the chat or unmuting yourself. All right, so just a few norms and also a few icons that you're going to be seeing throughout the PowerPoint presentation. The first one here is our Blue Man group. They are going to indicate that we're going to be using breakout rooms here during the workshop. So we're going to be using those a couple of times throughout the hour. We're also going to be using a Google tool called Jamboard. Some of you may be very familiar with it. Others it might be new, but we're going to use that as an interactive space as we go into our breakout rooms. So Jamboard, and then obviously the two other icons are for the use of the chat box and using the mic feature. So those are the few things you'll see throughout. Let's talk about our agenda. So we're talking about using questioning strategies. So we're going to use we're going to be introduced to a couple of strategies throughout this workshop. The first one is using visible observation to really dive in and to create curiosity with students, using visual art or photos to really get students curious and question. And then we're going to dive into another strategy called the question formulation technique, whereby this is not students responding to our questions, but it's a strategy and technique to help students generate their own questions. And then last, at the end of the workshop, we're going to look at how we can bring that question formulation technique into our own practice. So a lot of great stuff and a lot of things we're going to be working through today, but I want to start by just talking about the research. So as you can see in this graph right here, and a question I'm going to pose to you as you're looking at this graph, in the yellow shows the questioning of students as they get into upper elementary, middle school, and high school. What are we noticing with that? And why do questions start to decline as students get into those upper elementary and higher grade levels? Any thoughts around that? I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on why this research is indicating that questions decline, but our reading and writing skills continue to develop and increase. So I'm gonna take a pause here for just a second and see if we can get a little interaction going on here and see what your thoughts are around why questions start declining. Okay, so I'm hearing that Jennifer's saying there's an echo. Is anyone else hearing an echo with their sound?
No.
All right. So Candace is saying, thank you, Candace, for sharing. Fear the wrong answer. That whole idea about that fear of failure. If I ask the wrong question, what is that going to reflect on me? Awesome response. That's actually a lot of the reason why questions start declining. Peers judging them. Thank you, Erin, for sharing that. Yeah, that's also another aspect of the reason students, as they get older, stop asking questions. All right, formal schooling around age 4 may focus more on answers versus developing questions. Ooh, I really like that. Thank you, Trin, for sharing that. All right, too often, Paula's saying, too often told to stop asking questions. Yeah, so a lot of these are very, very real aspects of the reasons why students stop asking questions. So I'm gonna leave you, we're gonna be kind of diving into this a bit more as we go through the workshop. But I wanna leave you with this rhetorical question here. What would a classroom actually look like if teachers asked fewer questions and students asked more? So as we go through this workshop, let's think about what that culture, that classroom environment might look like if we as teachers are asking less questions and students are asking more. All right, so thanks you guys for sharing out. We're going to go ahead and get right into our first question strategy, which are the 2 different question strategies that we're going to be diving into. Again, we're going to be using visuals to develop the skill of observation and questioning, and also making inferences to really stimulate curiosity and deeper thinking. So that's our first part of the workshop, and then we're going to be using something called a prompt, or what's referred to in the question formulation technique as the cue focus. So it's really not a question for students to respond to, it's more of a prompt that they're going to generate their own questions. So we're going to go through that strategy as well. All right, so our first one is just this, using a visual photo to really stimulate curiosity. So I'm going to present to you this. It's called What's Going On in This Picture. I'll give you a little bit more resource around where this photo actually came from. I want to give you just a couple of minutes here to look at the picture and determine what you notice going on in this photo. All right, so I'm going to present 2 very, very simple questions to start thinking about. One, and you might have already done this in your own mind as you were looking at the photo, is what do you notice and what do you wonder about? So if you can share in the chat box a couple of thoughts around what you're noticing and what are you wondering about? So please, either I encourage you to share on the chat box, or if there's just something really that you want to say out loud, please feel free to unmute yourself and go ahead and share out with the group. What do you notice? What do you wonder? I love it. And as you guys are typing your own questions, feel free to look at the comments and questions that others are having. I love this. There's smog in the background and wonder where they are and where they're going exactly. So also looking at possible swimming or swimming lessons. So think about those cues that gave you that idea that there might be some swimming involved. So again, Paul is saying everyone looks ready for swimming. Others, I guess they are done swimming. There you go, because it looks like they're leaving somehow. All right, all these cues are adding more information about what could possibly be going on. A wonder from Paula, is it hot or humid day? There's 6 people with floaties walking on grass in the same direction. I wonder where they are going, what they are, what those buildings are in the background. Really great observations and really great I wonders. All right, so as we are not only making our own observations, but we're also able to see what others are wondering about, I'm gonna add a few more questions to kind of dive in a little bit deeper. What do you see that makes you say that? So what are those specific things that make you think that they're maybe at a beach or they're swimming? And then now, based on all the wonderings and noticings of others, what more can you find? Also, what story would you tell about this photo? If you were looking at this photo and you were writing a story about what's happening in this photo, what story would you tell? All right, I love how now Paula's diving in a little bit deeper and said that the haze makes her think that maybe there's that humidity could be really high. Like maybe like we notice in our own environment here on the West Coast or East Coast that there's oftentimes humidity has a factor in what looks like the quality of air, yeah. So in trends sharing, lack of shoes indicates beach swimming or that type of environment, summertime, fun time, water time. I love it. All right, so we're gonna continue on. I'm not gonna leave you hanging about what this is all about, but I do wanna give you a little bit of a background information for those of you guys that have not really heard of this program called What's Going On in This Picture. It's through the New York Times. And they collaborate with the Learning Network to bring photos every Monday during the school year for educators to access. And they present it on Monday, just like we're doing here at this moment. And they present only the picture stripped of the title and what the actual article is all about. And throughout the week, students can actually make comments on the website as to what they think is actually going on. And then that same week on Thursday, they reveal the story behind the photo. So it's a great way to get students engaged. It's a free resource for educators. You just need to go on and register. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and reveal exactly what is going on in this picture. And I'd love your comments around what now the information that we have now about the story and the location, what cues, what things that are actually become clearer on knowing the actual story. So this is at a beach. It's in, I'm gonna probably mispronounce it, so if anyone knows the correct pronunciation, please share it out. But at Qingdao in eastern China, around the Yellow Sea. And so what they have actually been experiencing is this large algal bloom that leaves their very, very popular beaches with this green kind of stringy muck on their shoreline. So this is exactly what's going on. What now, after knowing what this photo is actually about? What's an aha? If you want to share that out in the, or unmute or share it out in the chat box, I'd love to hear your thoughts around what now you know about that story. Candace is saying she took the training a while ago, similar activity, VTS, visual thinking strategies. Absolutely, Candace. Go on to the VTS website. They've got some great webinars on how to use visual thinking strategies, not only with photos, but with artwork, to really help students look and dive deeper into looking at evidence, making inferences, around just a photograph or a piece of art. So thanks, Candace, for sharing that. Paula's saying, I thought it was grass. Now I'm wondering if it was a health hazard. Absolutely. So we've got some new wonderings that have opened up based on actually knowing the story. All right, so the algal bloom and temperature change. So we can take this into all different directions. If you wanted to make this a science research, why do these algal blooms actually happen in this area? What are the climate what's the climate factors that might be causing this? So there's all kinds of ways that you can build out this particular question strategy. Yeah, so all kinds of great questions here, like what are the nutrients being introduced to the water sources? So again, what I really feel like is important is that now our students are more and more curious and have more questions than they did before. So this is an opportunity for them to build knowledge and to become curious and engaged in their own learning. All right, thanks you guys for sharing out all your questions. We're actually now going to move right into our next question strategy, which is the QFT, which is the question formulation technique. So instead of using questions to prompt students' questions, this strategy and technique is a way to allow students to start generating their own questions. So we're actually going to go through the steps here in a minute, and we're actually going to be putting on a student hat here in a little bit, and we're going to go through this process as a student, just so that we understand a little bit more about how to introduce this with in our own classrooms or with students. All right, so the first step in this technique is producing the questions. So the idea around this is you're going to be asking as many questions as you can from the prompt, or what's called the Q focus, as you can. The important aspect of this step, though, is you're not going to be stopping to discuss with others in your group for 4 minutes, okay? So you're going to be generating as many questions as you can based on the prompt that is given to you for 4 minutes, and you're not discussing any of those questions that you have or anybody else has for that first 4 minutes. And then if you are writing a statement, if you happen to write a statement, you're going to switch that or try to think about it. How would you change that statement into a question? So that's your first step in the question formulation technique. The second step after that 4 minutes is you're going to take a look at those questions, and it's called improving. So you're going to be looking at them in terms of whether or not those questions happen to be a close-ended or an open-ended. So close-ended meaning, are we able to answer that question in 1 or 2 words, or does it require a longer response, a longer answer in an open-ended question? And also looking at the advantages and disadvantages of both a closed-ended and an open-ended. Sometimes we just want a 1 or 2 word answer from our question, but oftentimes we want a much more in-depth one. I want to give an example. I can recall, it's been a while, but when my kids were in school and I would ask a question when they came home from school, I'd always say, how was your day? Now, I really didn't want the answer good, fine, okay, right? I really wanted to know what happened in their day, what was really going on. So I was asking a closed-ended question and wanting an open-ended response. So really take a look at those questions that you've asked during that 4-minute time frame and look at whether they're closed-ended or open-ended, and deciding the advantages or disadvantages. All right, our third step in this question formulation technique is looking at how to prioritize, because we're going to have a lot of questions generated during that 4-minute time frame, but we really want to narrow that down. Can we dive into every single one of those questions? It would be very difficult. So we really want to look at what are those most important questions on our list of questions that our group generated. So we're going to look at maybe the top 3 questions, and collectively in your group decide what 3 would you choose to be really able to address the prompt that you're going to be given, or the cue focus, and look at the reasons why you selected that particular, those particular questions. So I'm going to pause here because I feel like I've been long-winded. Anyone have any questions or thoughts around these steps before we actually dive in and look at our question focus and actually dive into this process as students here? Anyone have questions? Oh, so Ronnie's asking, are there any questions, or is it a standard-based question? So Ronnie, I'm wondering if you can unmute yourself and explain a little bit about why you asked that question or where that question's coming from. Thank you.
Yeah, actually, I was wondering whether I'm teaching physics in Baltimore City, and right now I'm having a parent-teacher conference. Oh my goodness!
There goes Ronnie.
Yeah. By the way, standard base, we have in Maryland, we have a standard for Common Core. So
Yes.
we actually, before we do questions, we actually base it on standards in Maryland. So that's why I'm asking, is it any questions that just come up in your mind? So that's it.
Good question. So now I know where you're coming from. So I'm going to answer the first part is, number 1, as a teacher, you know your curriculum. You know where you need your students to go. There is a purpose for you wanting students to ask questions, but we don't want just random questions about anything necessarily. So know your curriculum, know where you would want and why you would want them to ask these questions. So the second part of that, Ronnie, is to address this first step in producing your questions, just anything that comes to mind. So as you're going through this as a student, I want all of you just to think about anything that you might have a question about when I reveal that question focus. So good question. Anybody else have a question about these steps and the process? All right, awesome. So I'm going to go ahead now and show you how we're going to make this in a virtual environment interactive. So typically in an in-person, when I go through this as an in-person workshop, it looks much different. So we have to adapt in our virtual world right now. So we're going to be using something called Jamboard to be able to record or generate these questions. So these are stagnant slides right now. I'm gonna actually go into the Jamboards that you guys are gonna be working with in a minute, but I just wanna show you what the 2 slides in Jamboard actually look like. So the first one, first slide on your Jamboard is just going to be giving you those steps. So Jason is going to put a PDF in the chat box on the slide previous with those 3 steps, but also on your first slide, you'll see that there's the steps and what those rules are around each of those steps. And then the second slide is going to be your interactive slide. That's where you're going to be able to actually individually within your group, each person in the group is going to be generating their questions around this prompt or what's called the Q focus. So now I'm going to reveal what that Q focus is. So it's a quote by Voltaire. And the quote is, judge a person by their questions rather than their answers. So right now I'm going to share with you the Jamboard. That you're going to be interacting with. All right, so everybody can see the Jamboard now? Thumbs up? All right. So if you look over here at the top, there's arrows, and that's what's going to allow you to scroll from one slide to another. So you can see there's a series of 6 slides. We're going to be working right now with just the first slide and the second slide. Again, the first slide is, it gives you your steps as a reminder. And then the second slide is going to be your working, like a whiteboard. So think of a Jamboard as like a big whiteboard virtually. Over on the left-hand side are the tools that you're going to be using. So I'm going to show you the first tool by going back to the slide number 1. It's a laser pointer. You get to like point out, oh, here's our first slide, our first step, our second step. All right, then we're going to go to the second slide, scroll again. We're going to be using what's called the sticky note option, where you can basically click on a sticky note. It'll pop up. You can choose different colors, so have fun with that. Each person in your group might want to choose a different color for their sticky note. And you simply click on it and you can start typing your questions. And save it. And it goes right there on your canvas, on your whiteboard. All right. You'll notice there's a 3, you can move things around, what you're going to want to do when you get to the second step. You can use the 3 dots. If you wanted to edit your question, you can do that, duplicate it, or even delete it, okay? So that's the sticky note option that you're going to be using to add your questions in that first 4 minutes onto your Jamboard. How are we doing, you guys? Any questions about Jamboard?
Holly, I don't see anything in the chat right now, but I did just want to point out on that Jamboard slide, there is, you can see it here on this slide, there is a button that says clear frame. Please don't press that.
Thanks, Jason. I knew I was going to forget that.
Yeah, that will erase the whole board.
Clear your frame.
Yeah.
All right, so what we're going to be doing is Jason's going to be sending everyone into breakout rooms. In the chat box in one moment, Jason's going to be posting links to the different group numbers for your breakout rooms. So if you are going into breakout room 1, you're going to select the link underneath that group number so that you and your group have the correct link to the Jamboard that you're going to be interacting with. All right, so Jason just posted all of that in the chat box. So any questions about how to get onto the Jamboard that corresponds to the breakout room? I'm seeing shaking heads. No, thank you, Paula. All right, looks like we're good. We're gonna have about 15 minutes to go through those 3 steps of asking questions, to improving our questions, and prioritizing our questions. So remember, the first 4 minutes is just you working independently, thinking about this question prompt or cue focus of judge a person by their questions rather than by their answers, all right? So you're gonna be responding to that particular cue focus. All right, Jason, are we ready?
Yes, we are all set to go. So I'll just let people know that you'll know your group number by when you go into your breakout room, it'll say your group number at the top. So if it says group number 1, then you'll just go to the number 1 Jamboard and the link, and you will have all those links and the PDF in your breakout room. So you'll have access to everything that you need. And then the other thing I'll mention is that you're going to go to your rooms automatically. So when I press open room, everyone will go there. You'll see a timer counting down to 15 minutes, and then your room will close automatically at the end of 15 minutes. So you don't have to worry at all about opening and closing rooms. You just jump in and get those questions going and jump through the process. If you have any questions, people will be coming into your rooms and they can help you out.
All right, have fun, you guys. And remember, please introduce yourself once you get into your breakout rooms before you start that first step. All right, have fun, everyone, and we'll see you in a little bit. Well, we're going to start with a little bit of a reflection. I really would love for you guys to unmute and share out what your thoughts are in this process, having to, being a student going through this technique and those 3 steps. Anyone want to just kind of share out what that was like? I know there were some Jamboard issues. But what was the actual process like? Anyone want to share their thoughts?
My favorite part was looking at the questions, and then we liked one of the questions and we refined it to be not closed-ended and changed it to an open-ended question, because the idea of the question itself was good, but it just needed to be changed to an open-ended. So I liked that part.
Yeah, so really looking or having students just have that opportunity to look at their question. Like I said, what are we trying to find out? What is the answer that we're looking for? Is a closed-ended question the right route, or can we do some changes, like Katie was just saying, to make it more robust and to add more of a response from our question to dive in deeper? Anyone else want to share out about the process itself?
Ollie, I'll just share that we have some interesting things in the chat. So we're hearing from Alex that was promoting higher order thinking, and Radhika that was diving deep into the concept. And then Hannah just liked how it was different people interpreted the prompt in different ways. So some interesting comments there.
Yeah, so Hannah, can you, would you mind sharing out a little bit more about that point in having different perspectives? What did you gain from seeing other people's perspectives? Would you mind sharing a little bit around that?
It was really interesting to see how each of us tackled the prompt and which parts we focused on, especially in our group. Each of us on our own focused on something completely different than any of the other people. And so all of our questions were vastly different from the others, and questions that each of us probably wouldn't have come to on our own. And so it was great to get everyone's perspectives and be able to combine all of those different ideas.
Absolutely. Thanks, Hannah, for sharing that, because that's exactly what we want our students to be able to understand about themselves, is that their perspective and how they would read that question prompt might be real different, but not necessarily bad or in a way that would be negative. So allowing that opportunity for students really to think about things and to share the questions that they might have, and in gaining that kind of that power of like, my questions matter, you know, mine are just as important as somebody else's. So thanks, Hannah, for sharing that. So Trin shared as well in the chat box that there was a rich variety of questions developed. The prioritizing process was difficult. I think I needed some direction or purpose to guide my selection process. So thanks for sharing that, Trin, because as we go through now putting on our teacher hat in this QFT technique, we're going to kind of look at that and knowing what, how to guide our students towards selecting those that are most important. Okay, so we're going to kind of dive into that a little bit by putting on our teacher hat here.
And Holly, if I can add, and I was also in Hannah and Trin's group, when we got to the prioritizing, I found myself second guessing myself because I was asking, well, what does the teacher want? What is the teacher trying to get out of this whole discussion? Like, where are we going with this?
Yeah, yeah. So
that was anxiety producing and you know, chipping away at my confidence rather than my excitement.
Okay.
But that's not all bad, because that's we get students to actually produce when we get them out of their comfort zone. If we really want them to ask questions, we need to do that. And I have one more thing I just really want to quickly interject. I liked how the Jamboard did not identify who was writing the questions, because I think that's so important to the students as well, is that they can use some of those other questions to maybe even build that confidence, that self-confidence, and say, yeah, I can ask these questions because nobody knows that it's me saying this. So.
Yeah, great point, Paula. Really like that share out. So the anonymity of asking your questions can be really, really important, especially as your students are first going through this this technique. Okay, so allowing them to have that I don't want everybody to know what I'm asking at first is really, really going to build so that students become more and more confident. So going back to what Michelle was saying as well, so when we first start generating all those questions, we're thinking broadly, we're thinking divergently, we're opening up just to anything that comes to mind. And then when we go through that second step, we have to kind of think about each one and how to improve it. What is it that we really wanted to ask? So that kind of starts thinking a little bit more analytically, like more convergently. So looking at specifics, and then prioritizing is getting into that metacognition, that, you know, analyzing and thinking about our own thinking about our own questions. What is it that we feel like is really important? So it's a lot of transferring of different thinking processes as you go through those steps. Anybody else want to share out? And please feel free. I love Michelle's comment about that third step was very, very challenging. Anybody else find that a step was challenging? Because this is exactly what your students are going to be going through as well.
Is there any reason to let the students know prior to an event like that, which I think is really quite outstanding visually as well as intellectually, that there are no right or wrong questions? There are questions that need to be asked, and one question will precede the thought process of someone else thinking about something else when they see it on the board, rather than having to verbalize it. These kids have a difficult time verbalizing things today for many different reasons. So seeing something written gives them a chance to understand that there's no right, there's no wrong, there's just a new way of inflecting the idea in their head, which says, oh, I didn't know that. So the questioning process is really about learning, giving them a chance to learn new ways to think, which is what education and learning should be about anyway.
All right, so Bob, within our team, we always give Skittles to those questions from our participants that are just spot on. Yes, it's, you know, so when you go through this with your students, and that's why we want you guys to go through this as a student in this workshop, is to really set that stage, set that culture, set that environment prior to going into this process, saying, hey, there's no right or wrong. Right. This is what your thought process is. and how you look at that prompt that is being given to you. So absolutely setting the stage, letting them know that there's no wrong answer or there's no wrong question here. All right, awesome. Thanks you guys for sharing out. I do want to move to our next process because I want you now to kind of switch over, put on our teacher hat, and let's go through the technique of actually designing what's called the Q focus. Again, remembering that that Q focus is not a question. We don't want our students to be responding to our questions. We want to give them something to stimulate their own questioning. So there are steps in designing that Q focus, and we're going to be going back into breakout rooms to really dive in deeper on how to design this Q focus. So the first thing is, and that goes back to understanding what was your purpose? Why do you want students to generate their questions? What is your purpose, your intention? You know your learning goals and outcomes, you know your curriculum. So what is it based on your curriculum that you want them to generate questions around? The second thing is list several ideas, just generate possible ideas. So before coming up with the question focused or the Q focus that I had around judging a person by their questions, not the answers, there was a purpose in that, and I'll reveal that in a little bit. But think of several different ideas to come up with. It could be a statement, a quote that I use. It could be a picture or even a video. So think about it that way. It's something that is going to stimulate new questions or new line of thinking. And then look at each of your ideas and develop your pros and cons, okay? So each of the ideas, you're gonna look at whether it's clear. You know, if it's too ambiguous, the questions are going to be way out there. We want variety, but if the Q focus is not clear, then we're not going to have our purpose in wanting students to ask questions. It's not going to align with our purpose. So make sure it's clear. Also make sure it's not a question. Okay, it's a statement. It's a prompt for students to generate their own questions. So keep that in mind. And whether or not each one of the ideas for your Q focus, does it provoke a new line of thinking, okay? So really keep that in mind. And also last is it does not show your bias, okay? For instance, if I'm going into a study on pollution, if I had a question Q focus that said pollution is bad, where do you think the questions that students are going to generate are going to be around? Pollution is bad, right? Well, we know it's bad, but that's not the line of thinking we really want them to start diving into. So make sure it's not you're showing any bias. And then once you go through the pros and cons of each of your possible ideas, you have to choose one. Which one really meets your purpose? And then last is really think about the questions that students are going to generate on the one idea that you chose for your Q focus. All right, so what we're going to do now, Jason's going to put this PDF in the chat box so you have to reference it as you go into this process of designing a Q focus. So thanks, Jason, for putting that. But I am going to present a scenario from which you're going to start designing that Q focus in your breakout rooms. So this is a scenario just so that you have kind of the purpose in mind of some possible field of study or lesson. And this scenario is actually on the website you can find. It's called therightquestion.org. And this scenario says that you have a group of high school students in an American literature class, and they're about to start reading the book, The Great Gatsby. So the teacher's goal for students to generate questions is to really be curious about the purpose or theme of the book written by F. Scott Fitzgerald. Okay, so your Q focus is going to be at the beginning of their study of reading the book, The Great Gatsby. All right, so again, in your breakout rooms, you're going to use that PDF with the steps to design the Q focus to collectively, as a group, use this scenario and design a Q focus that your group feels would be the best to address the teacher's purpose for wanting students to generate questions. How are we doing? Any questions about what we're going to be doing next? All right, so Jason, I don't see any questions, so I'm going to go ahead and have Jason. We're going to only have about 10 minutes because we really are running a bit behind, and I don't want to leave you be respectful of your time, but about 10 minutes in your groups to go through those steps and see what kind of Q focus you would come up with. What I'm going to set the stage here is that there's not a wrong Q focus that you're going to come up with. There's not a right one, there's not a wrong one, okay? And I'm really excited to kind of see what each group is going to come up with. All right, Jason, are we ready?
Yep, ready to go. And I put those Jamboard links in there again. You should all have them, but just in case you need them for making this, you have it. So we're all set to go. Have a great time, and we'll see you back in about 10 minutes.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Really curious to hear what you all came up with for your Q focus based on that scenario. Anyone want to share out? How about group 3? Anyone in group 3, if you wouldn't mind unmuting and sharing out what you came up with for your Q focus.
I can speak for group 3. We thought that maybe we could put a picture of the cover of the book, and we tried to look for the picture that there are several editions. We tried to pick one that portrays the 1920s, so we avoided the one with the eyes. So we kept looking, but our challenge was inserting it in a Jamboard.
No worries. I think that's an awesome idea, is just literally showing them a visual of what the cover is, and it kind of presents an idea of what the story is really all about.
Yeah, the era, you know, they're all the, so I don't know if you can see our Jamboard. Can I share?
Yeah, go ahead. I don't know if you can share.
Let me see. Nope, disabled. All right.
You can do it. You can do it now. I just made it possible for you to share.
Yeah, I'll just show you because we, hold on, let me show it to you. You cannot share screen. I still can't share. No.
Okay.
No, they have to stop sharing first before.
Oh, I can share.
Yep.
Oh, I see. You want to stop sharing? Or doesn't matter. Yeah, man. We picked 3 pictures, and we were at the stage trying to figure out which cover of the book would be a better one to generate more questions. That's where we stopped at.
Awesome. I really like it. I like how you kind of tied in the first part of the workshop with using a visual to actually have students generate questions. Awesome idea. Snaps for group 3. All right, how about group 2? Anyone from group 2 want to share out?
Sure, I can. We really focused on the aspect of going with that point that said for students to make personal connections to the story. And so our statement, we first wanted it to be around something that had to do with an interest of the students, whether it be fashion, music, relationships, business dealings, because there's always that overriding question of Gatsby's business dealings, the legitimacy or illegitimacy of them. And so first of all, then we decided on fashion. We picked some pictures of fashion in the 20s, and we ended up with this statement: style is a way to say who you are without having to speak. And
Whoa. Group 2.
Well, we were so excited because we're science and math people. So we were like, okay, we think we got this.
Holly, you
I
just made me
love
rethink-
it.
you
I
made me
really
rethink
love
my
it. I
wardrobe.
really feel like that's going to generate a lot of awesome questions.
What did you say, Jason?
I said, you're making me rethink my wardrobe now.
Awesome.
But this was
Thanks.
kudos to Katie and Jenny. So thanks. So Jennifer, thank you.
All
was definitely
right,
a
great
struggle.
job, group 2. So you can kind of see how between group 3 and group 2, how different the approach was to the scenario and the purpose of wanting students to generate questions. So just wanted to reiterate that there's really no right or wrong Q focus. It's really around what you want to lead your students towards. So awesome job, group 2. How about group 1? Anyone want to share out what they came up with in group 1? Or you can share it in the chat.
No, I'll just quickly tell you. So we came up with a video clip from one of the films about Gatsby, such as a party scene that looks glamorous on the surface, but of course there's a lot going on. And simply showing that couple-minute clip to the students and then letting them come up with their questions.
Love it, Michelle. Love it. Group 1, great job. So using a video, again, going back to those visuals, what are they going to get out of that video clip or even that picture like group 2 or group 3? What are they going to get from just looking at visual cues or watching that video? Excellent. I love it. So again, very different approach and very different direction each group took. So not one right or wrong answer. So really quickly, I know we're really running behind and I want to share one last thing, but any challenges or takeaways in designing your Q focus? You can share in the chat.
I'd like to just ask one question. To me, as a business guy, the question is, why are we attempting to make them learn this in the first place? What's the objective, the takeaway that they want to have when they leave that class to continue having questions and dialogue amongst themselves? Because there's very little time in a classroom usually to get the kind of dialogue that we're having here, where more than 1 or 2 students is willing to speak, because at most of these kids' ages, they're not willing to be comfortable speaking out loud in front of their peers at all. So the question is, why? Why would we even be having this situation in discussion about this book? What is the objective? Why is it important that they even learn this? I think we need to look at that from the standpoint of whatever we're teaching.
Right, and Bob, you've got a really good point, and I will communicate that the direction that the teacher in the scenario that I presented was trying to get at is that look at and connect themselves to, because the American dream. So the Gatsby is all around the American dream, and right. It was written years ago, obviously, and how has it evolved, how has it changed, and how does the American dream really impact them as an individual? So that's the direction that this particular teacher in that American Lit class was going with, giving you guys that scenario and allowing you to really kind of generate and go through the process of what a Q focus is. But you're right, Bob, having that purpose, what is it that you really want them to get out of it, and how does it reflect, and how is it meaningful to the student? So yeah, great point. Thank you for bringing that up. I really like that you're thinking about that. And that actually goes into the last portion, is how to actually plan to do this question formulation technique. The scenario that we were using for the Q focus just now was at the beginning of the lesson, but you can use it in the middle to maybe generate more questions for students as you're maybe reading the book, for instance. You want them to have a new line of thinking, so you might insert that QFT, not just at the beginning, it could be at the middle, or it could be at the end, so that students can use those questions to dive in deeper into a research project, or maybe even do some type of debate. So really, what is your reason? So decide first on your lesson or your unit, and then look at the topics that you want to cover within that lesson. What are those concepts? And then really decide why you're using it. Do you want them to deepen their understanding? Do you want to stimulate new line of thinking? So really think and decide on your purpose, because we do want students to start understanding how to ask good questions. And that's the reason for this whole technique in the first place, is giving them the skill on how to develop good questions. All right, and then, like I said, where in the lesson do you want it? And then you need to have a reason for those questions that the students are gonna generate. So they are gonna, if you just have them generate a lot of questions without being able to use those questions in some way, then they feel like I just asked a lot of questions for no purpose. So really need to make those connections. What are you gonna do with it? To conduct research, like I said, conduct a Socratic seminar or debate, speech or a paper, something that they're going to be using, and those specific questions that they have generated. So this is gonna be in the chat box for you guys to access this PDF as well. Jason's gonna put that in the chat box. So this is a takeaway for you. But I do want to encourage, I know we're running way over time and I want to be respectful, but we are going to open up for the last about 10 minutes or so in an informal session. We call it our Create Cafe. I would love to have you guys stay on with us. If you have additional comments, questions, concerns around the process itself, or just how you might, ideas on how you might bring this into your own classroom. So before we do the Create Cafe, I do want to communicate that we do have additional workshops like this coming up. Oops, sorry. Our next one is November 18th. Are you still a STEM educator is the theme for that workshop. And then our last one for 2020 is December 9th, where we're talking about interdisciplinary learning. So we hope that you guys will come back and join us for those two workshops. But really want you guys to stay connected with us. So at the bottom, you're gonna see how you can stay connected with us through our educator community. So that link at the bottom, you will, if you join our educator community, get the information about our workshops and other things and resources that we have available. On our TGR EDU Explore site, we have lessons free for you to download, a variety of different subjects. So please go on to our site, tgreduexplore.org. And then we're also going to be putting in the chat box a survey link. We really, really want to hear from you guys, your thoughts around this workshop. We do use all of the comments that we get on our survey. We take it to heart to make sure that we're meeting the needs of you all, you guys as educators out there. So please, if you will fill out that survey when you see it in the link. All right, that is all for me. Please stay on. Like I said, we're gonna stop sharing our screen. It'll be an informal session where you can ask questions, or we can dive into particular subjects that you would like to have a conversation around. So hang on with us if you can.